Welcome to SHOWstudio. It's our second live panel discussion of the day, and obviously we're unpicking what's going on at the couture shows over in Paris. Really special discussion for two reasons. Firstly, because we're talking about Dior, so we get to analyse everything that the wonderful Raf Simons is doing there. And second reason it's very special is because I have amazing Stephen working away behind me, creating this incredible mural depicting fashions that we're seeing in Paris, which is absolutely beautiful. It's also very special because I have an amazing set of women with me to help discuss what's going on at the Haute Couture shows, but I'll let you guys introduce yourselves, starting with you, Verity.
I'm Verity Parker. I'm a stylist and contributing fashion editor at Matches Fashion.
Hello, my name's Lucy Norris. I'm a trend forecaster and fashion historian.
Hello, I'm Kerry Taylor. I'm a fashion historian and specialist auctioneer in vintage fashion.
I'm going to start by picking on you, Kerry, which I know is mean because this is the first panel you've done with us. But I want to talk about the Dior codes that people would refer to and the pieces that must have come your way. Have you sold quite a lot of Dior? Is it something that people are very interested in, very inspired by?
Yes, I mean, I sell Dior in every auction practically. And obviously the earlier and more elaborate it is, the more valuable it is. But we also sell things like Dior London, Dior New York, which was the more affordable end, which gives you the essence of the look. It wasn't really pret-a-porter, it was sort of in the middle. And you know, we sell that all the time. It's very popular.
Is there as much interest in what we've seen sort of with Bill Gates and Galliano as there is for the early stuff, or do you find that people are really turned on by the Christian Dior pieces?
The earlier the better. I mean, my dream would be to find a bar ensemble with its sort of little pink jacket and its pleated, massive pleated skirt. And I think with Dior, when I think of Dior, I mean, he said without foundation there is no fashion. And so for me, Dior is about shape. It's about control. It's not a natural free beauty. It's corsetry. It's nipped in waists. It's big rounded hips. It's quite fecund in a way, but it's very luxurious, very beautiful, and it's that ballerina look, you know, which has gone on and on ever since, and it's been copied by everyone.
You're both nodding there, and it's interesting because I think everyone's got that on their mind a little bit more, the original codes of Dior, just because Raf Simons has so obviously, you know, said how much he's referring to that early period and really paying tribute. Are you a fan of what's been going on with Raf Simons at Dior?
Yes. Interrupt. Yeah, no, I am in a big way. I love Raf. I love his women's wear. I love his men's wear, and I think has been such a good marriage there. I think it's. I mean, there's been lots of opinion about it obviously being successful, or maybe it's a bit tame, or maybe a bit repetitive, but there's definitely something, like Kerry said, that does work with the codes of the house, and I think after Galliano that was kind of what you, well, after Bill, but that was what you sort of needed, I think. Yeah,
a reassertion of Dior as a house.
Yeah, but it definitely has his touches to it too, and I think that's what I really like about it, that it's sort of subtle but respectful, and you almost feel like there will be a change coming. You know, I don't know if it'll always be this sort of playing on, you know, of what Christian always did, but...
Because it's worth remembering it's a very short period of time to reference as well, which I think people often forget. You know, it's just these 10 years. So there's not that much to mime in a way. What's your take on it, Lucy?
Well, I think it's a marriage made in heaven. Because Raf is very... well, he's such a respectful designer, and obviously he has his own intellectual kind of philosophies, and his aesthetics very much rooted in, you know, the Belgian sort of aesthetic of kind of decon recon and stripping back. Then very much he's brought Margiela's kind of legacy to Dior, you know, the man that he kind of heralded so much and worshipped very much. You can kind of sort of see almost Margiela's living and breathing at Dior as well, because he's so much a part of Raf's work, and Helmut Lang as well. So and having that minimal kind of, which is very contemporary, of course, you know, the Phoebe Philos of this world and the Rafs, this is what big houses want right now, because it's clean, and then oh wow, you know, and you strip back and you've got these beautiful feminine mid-20th century codes that are just so deliciously beautiful, and like you said, the ballerina and all those kinds of shapes and the wasp waist. So you've got that gorgeous kind of sort of Grace Kelly minimalism that he was already tapping into with Jill Sander when he was kind of like warming up with that trilogy collection. So, and that's the thing with Raf's work, it's so romantic, but it's very, very clean and very, very wearable.
It's interesting when you say romantic, because I feel like there is something that's very seductive and very romantic about things that are less opulent and that are a little bit more minimal, and I think that's what's been interesting to see him do, is it feels very, very modern. And I think especially in couture, I think people think that it's one of those cases of you throw as much on a frock as you can, and it's quite a palette cleanser. It's not just revitalising Dior, it also feels like it's really nice to have that in couture at the moment, and I feel like it's lifted couture in a way. You know? It's
really influenced couture. I mean, I've even seen the influences at Lagerfeld, I mean at Chanel, you know, Lagerfeld's designs, the way that people are beading, they're beading in a more of a minimal but very feminine, graphic way. And it's all coming, and Raf had only been showing 2 seasons, and you could already see his influence within Paris and couture specifically. Actually, on Bautista Valley, all kinds of houses, they were mimicking the colour combinations, the beading. Are you okay, Stephen?
Maybe it's too early to tell, but do you think that all the excitement we're seeing around the house now, is it causing people to be more interested in the earlier work of Dior, or do you think it's a bit too early to tell? I'm interested in if people are kind of wanting more of those nipped-in waist jackets because they're now such a feature of what Raf's doing.
I think they've always been wanted. I mean, a lot of my buyers, if you like, they're collectors, they're museums. They are, to a degree, women who wish to buy to wear, but mainly it's collectors. And I mean, for me, I like the opulence. I like, you know, I like the beading. I like the appliqué flowers. I like all of that. And for me, most couture saddens me because it's just not opulent enough.
Yeah.
You know, I'm used to looking at things dripping in serge embroidery, and for me, I say, bring it on.
So do you like what Raf's doing there then, or is it a little too?
I don't know, I'm not sure. I mean, I really do have one foot in the grave the entire time. I'm always looking backwards. I'm not as impressed as I was perhaps with some of the earlier Galliano early collections. I do think Galliano's a genius, and they're big shoes to fill, so I'm not sure yet.
And it's difficult, it's interesting what you say about the opulence, because also in many ways that opulence does often tie into that craft, and you know, things like Lesage and the incredible ateliers that you see there, who sadly, you know, that if it wasn't for Chanel having supported them, perhaps wouldn't be around.
Exactly.
And I think it is, in a way, that a cleaning off of that opulence is worrying in a way, because you think, what's going to happen to the specialist? Yeah, exactly, who will bring it back?
They're still using the crafts, but I think that the recession, and I think that when we had the economic sort of, you know, problems that we had in 2008, I think that really changed fashion. I don't think it was fashionable to be seen to be so maximalist, and I think that we're still feeling the effects of that. It might be that we ping back, and I'm sure we will, because with every trend there's a counter reaction to something. If economic sort of the climate, you know, continues to improve, but there is this sort of conspicuous consumption trend that came through where women were wearing cognac diamonds for a while instead of pure diamonds. It wasn't fashionable to show off your wealth if you were incredibly rich for a while. So I think that there was all kinds of sort of economic things that fed into this taste for the more appropriate. The Galliano, you know, aesthetic came across at that, you know, towards the end of his time. It's a little bit outdated. It did feel out of step. You know, Galliano, when I was sort of 15, 14 years old, he's the reason why I came into fashion. You know, his designs were phenomenal for Dior, and you know, and we still look back on them with great respect now. But I do think that it's exciting to see Raf take the helm.
And also for somebody, to replace, it's like you need to be different, because actually if it would always feel like a poor man's Galliano, and I think that was the problem with lots of other designers, you know, worrying about couture and making it more like John's when it was, you know, when they were sort of working in time with him. So I think it almost did need a change, you know, for that sort of Belgian aesthetic, like you said.
Yeah, and I think that at the moment is what is selling. I think that people want the Phoebe Philos and
it's more commercial.
They want that, so they were able to sort of kind of make Dior feel relevant again.
But if you were going to be maximalist in any way, it would have to be couture. So it's interesting that not even couture is willing to be full on anymore. So everything has to be sort of stripped back to be cooler and minimal and maybe more boyish or. Whatever it is, not even in couture can you go quite that crazy. But
don't you think with globalization of the world economies, although here in Europe we've all been suffering, Russia and China have not, actually they're the people who've got the money to go and buy these things. So I don't know.
But when Jean-Paul Gaultier, for example, does it, and I'm not saying he's doing a very good job of it in the last few years, but he's one that's seriously still holding on to those sort of lady days and going for it. And it comes across as quite grotesque.
Yeah, and a lot of the reporters really is not in favour of that. It gets
because it does feel outdated.
But I think that he's taking it a little bit too far. I think he's gone into sort of other territory.
I guess what we want is someone that can marry the two, present something that does feel modern, but still has that technique and that craft. I think in a way sometimes it can almost feel lazy to do something so clean, because that effortlessly looks modern. And
it's interesting though, because maybe I'm wrong, but I always feel like actually if you look at the pure aesthetic of those, original Christian Dior, they were relatively minimal. I mean, the shape was exquisite, but they were.
It is to do with structure.
To look at it could be seen as sort of relatively minimal because it was a beautifully fitting jacket. And
or the zigzag line where it's absolutely sculpted and it's fitted to you. It has wings flying off at angles and buttons and brooches just there. And very, very sensual, very chic, very sleek, but very sculpted.
But it wasn't sort of piled
and
on
incredibly
in that sense that it looked bonkers at a glance.
I mean, I would love to get inside one of these dresses and see if the construction's similar still.
What's the most amazing Dior piece that's ever come your way? Have you ever found it hard to let something go?
Oh, I find lots of things hard to let go.
I can imagine.
I'm just trying to think. No, I mean, anything that's from that sort of mid-century I think is wonderful. Some of the very, very early things from 1948, they're almost like a pair of curtains in terms of the fabric can be very heavy because after the war you didn't have the opulence, but by the time you get into the mid part of the century it's all guns blazing. The skirts are miles long, you have all of the beautiful embroidery and beading. No, there's not. I'm still waiting for the great one to come. I mean, I've sold fabulous ones, which have, made tens of thousands of pounds, but no, I'm still waiting. There's one out there waiting for me still to take my breath away. With
the people who are buying it, you mentioned kind of museums and collectors. For the Dior pieces that you have, does it tend to be that rather than people just wanting it to wear?
I mean, we occasionally have, somebody with their own private jet who flies in, buys a few couture dresses and then gets on their little jet and flies out again. But mainly at the top end for sort of £10,000 plus range, we're looking at serious collectors who would never want to wear them because they'd be frightened of damaging them.
But it's still for their personal archive.
It's for their personal archive. It's like a fine wine that you lay down you would never drink.
And do they tend to be? Do you have designers who shop with you?
Yes, I do. I have lots of designers and lots of fashion houses who design, who buy from me. And obviously I'm not going to say who, because they would kill me. But every sale is full of design references. And sometimes, it can be something that's £100 and you'll suddenly see that on a catwalk somewhere that's been altered, transformed. They maybe take a line of beading and suddenly it's this big and that's really exciting for me. I love that, and I love students as well. I love students coming to see because they're our future.
Yeah, of course. It's interesting, we've spoken quite a lot on some of these panels, especially when we've had curators in, about this kind of obsession that we're having with archives now, and especially young designers cottoning on to how important that is to keep things. And do you see houses trying to buy back stuff? That
all of the major houses do.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm telling any secrets there. I think all of the major fashion houses now realise that to have a really strong archive is building their own brand.
Sure.
It's reinforcing the sense of history behind these wonderful brands, and not only that, they're very useful as design references for all the major designers now.
So they take them out of the circuit by getting them back into their...
They'll look at something. I'm sure, you know, Raf goes down to the archive and looks through, and there'll be something that really triggers an idea or a thought, and you'll see it interpreted. But that's lovely. I love that when it's an idea that's, and Galliano did the same. But what I don't like is when sometimes you see pieces which are absolute copies.
Yeah.
And I think that's really lazy.
We were just talking.
We were.
It's interesting that when we talk about this, because I think we've all seen examples, and obviously quite widely read about examples where designers aren't given access to that archive of the house that they're working for, you know, and it can be incredibly frustrating. Well, it was a big thing that was made when McQueen was at Givenchy, you know, that he didn't have proper access to the archive, and it was incredibly frustrating. And then there are designers that choose not to, you know, there's that popular thing about Nicola Gasquet not using the Balenciaga archive, and then Alex Wang making a big point to sort of take everyone to see it.
Doing the opposite. Yeah.
It is a kind of tricky one, I think, if you are a designer, not to be weighed down. We were talking about this a lot on the Schiaparelli discussion this morning, of how not to be weighed down by heritage, but how to get it right.
But Karl Lagerfeld's so brilliant at that.
Exactly.
I mean, he is the master at this because he understands the references, but he sort of reinvents the look. He twists he'll take elements. And even McQueen, you know, he took the Dior houndstooth check and made them this size. It's fabulous.
I have the blouse. Talking of archive, never worn, Escher. I will debut it one day.
I hope it's live. So let's talk about, you know, if we're speaking about the ethos that we'd like to see come through, what are the Dior codes, or I hate this term, but like the house DNA that we think should always be in a Dior collection? Is it that focus on silhouette and shape that we've been talking about? Is there anything else that, you know, is it particular tones, is it particular emblems? You know, we talked about things like Lily of the Valley before, but what do we think is so important to always see in a Dior collection?
I think it's something about the style of the woman. I don't think it always needs to be so literal as like a sort of piece. I think it's all about, maybe as a stylist, but I don't know, I think it's something about the way that they are and the set that they've created and the hair and makeup, and it's sort of everything that sort of prevails with the clothes, you know, that's so important.
With this idea of France as well, isn't it? Which
totally,
I think is
it's that sort of real sort of height of luxury, those beautiful colours, the tones, the music, not just in the show, but, you know, I think that sort of does really set a scene for how these pieces sort of, you know, present themselves. And I'm sure, you know, they think of it in a, you know, the designers obviously think of it in a very literal sense, so they're thinking about the pieces, but the whole aesthetic of the brand and everything that comes with it is an interesting thing, I think, when you're talking about codes.
Yeah, I think there's a, and I mean this in a good way, there's a loftiness to Dior, which I think is really, really important.
Yeah.
It's very, very feminine, it's very romantic, and it's very luxurious. So as long as he keeps those three things, and he can pretty much do what he likes. But if he started doing, I don't know, skimpy little unstructured chiffon things, Greek goddess style, I suppose I'd come around to it, but
You're like, but I wouldn't.
I'd probably hate it though.
Do you agree with all of those things, Lisa? Do you think it is a kind of an ethos thing?
Well, definitely the structure's there.
Yeah.
Like you said, Kerry, it's very much, it's quite architectural in the sense that it isn't about sort of, it's quite, when we were talking about when Alexander Wang, the Balenciaga panel that we did last season, you know, really he was at the opposite end of the scale. Christian Dior was about confining the woman and kind of sort of, the wasp waist, you know, and creating this sort of fantastical kind of idea of kind of romanticism, really. And I think that, like you said, the importance of nature. You know, he was very, you know, obviously, like you said, the Lily of the Valley flower inspired the new look, and then, of course, you know, he had the tulip collection, so he drew a lot from nature, and also incredible sort of, not just the new look, as, you know, as it was coined, but just other shapes as well, you know, the A-line skirt, lots and lots of shapes that people don't necessarily associate with Dior straight. And that idea, like you were saying, about sort of style, the look, you know, the cocktail hour, and that whole kind of sort of world around that, you know, he really, really sort of captured.
So you said it's a whole world. I think it's more than just the cut of a skirt. I think it's the whole sort of world.
The chic-ness of a cocktail
exactly.
hour, and there's all of this great stuff that he very, very sort of directly engaged with. This idea of all the kind of sort of the etiquette that surrounded the cocktail hour, that you wore gloves but the hostess didn't, you had to have and he kind of really engaged with that in his designs and sort of riffed off that. So it was, very much sort of socially and culturally was really sort of tapping into the chicness of mid-century.
Well, it's that interesting idea of tradition, which is something that you picked up on Kerry, which is, I was just at the Dior on menswear, the show when I was in off on my menswear travels, and I found it really interesting because Chris Van Ash, he put a quote on everyone's seats from Dior, and I'm not going to be able to remember it perfectly, but the premise of this quote was, it was a Christian Dior quote that he'd come across, which was about tradition and the importance of tradition and how tradition is right and improper, and it kind of said, in times of trouble we must go back to tradition. And I think there's an interesting thing in general in fashion at the moment going on about appropriateness and being dressed in a suitable, appropriate, even perhaps modest way. It's something that a lot of people were talking about when we saw that Prada menswear collection that we just saw, and I find that it feels like the time is very right for a house like Dior at the moment. This focus on, it's something that's proper. I think fashion's been very naughty for a while, and actually people quite like this idea of something that's
a bit more ladylike.
Exactly, yeah.
Correct, a bit more Audrey Hepburn rather than.
I think correct is an interesting word. Yeah, exactly. And also femininity as well. I think that's something that we're seeing a lot of, this a girlishness, and that being seen as equally strong as a kind of power suit. So it feels like a very interesting time for Dior.
And that kind of, he's like Coco Chanel or even a Marc Jacobs. Dior was a great marketeer. I mean, that shape, poor old Jean Lanvin was peddling that 19th century sort of romantic hourglass non-stop for the first 50 years of the 20th century and didn't really get much sort of credit for it. And then he came along and just basically did a better PR version of it, and it was much more, she wasn't hugely into being a big public megastar, and was a little bit more sort of behind the scenes, and he came along and scooped it up, and it's this new shape, and it wasn't new at all, it's just, but so I see Christian Dior as a very, very clever marketeer,
very shrewd businessman.
Very shrewd kind of, and I think that even comes through in the designs, and the women are very together, and it's incredibly polished and Parisian, and it's a whole look.
Yeah, it is that polish is a very good word for it. I think there isn't that idea of kind of anything. We all love it in fashion sometimes where things feel a little bit rushed or a little bit last minute or a little bit like brainwave of the designer an hour before the catwalk show, and there's none of that in Dior. It feels like it's almost icy in a way, and it's warm in its femininity, but there's that kind of sense of a really proper woman, which I think is quite exciting.
The archetypal sort of fashion, untouchable.
Yeah, which I think does chime quite well with Raf Simons, because I think he is excited by things that do feel a little bit fearsome in a way. He's always been interested in tribes and gangs, in his menswear. And I know that's at the opposite end of the spectrum to the
This is another kind of tribe.
But it's a similar ethos, isn't it? That idea of something untouchable, something that you're not a part of. And I think that comes through quite nicely in Dior.
Yeah.
Should we see what he's done for this season?
I like the panniers.
I was going to say, you'll be a fan of this.
Panniers,
And it's, again, we're going back to that incredible floral set, which is really, really lovely, because the last couture was a bit more pulled back in terms of the set.
Very pure, isn't it? Very white, very pure. Looks quite wearable.
I think that's a different silhouette for him, though. To me, this feels, I know he's been looking at the waist, obviously, extensively, but there's been more fluidity, I think, to what he's been doing.
Yeah, interesting that he's playing with hemlines as well as the
and necklines actually there as well. You see there's three completely different necklines. So 3 different scoops, really subtle.
I think it's really interesting as well, the sporty things that he always puts in, even if we can just go back, that neckline, that the very, very simple, almost like racery type neckline.
Yeah, it's very Audrey, that one.
Yeah.
Number 5.
But also this idea, like, if you look at the girl who's just got her hands sort of nonchalantly shoved in her pockets.
Yeah, that sporty edge.
I think there's something about, everyone always says that he's modernising couture, but then it is,
They've all got their hands in their pockets, and it has got that sort of, even though they've got heels this time, because of course he's had them in, trainers. It's still got that kind of sort of, you know, just walking with your hands in your pockets. It's almost got a teenage edge.
And they're
to
quite
it.
bare-faced, aren't they? So they look especially young.
Yeah.
Number
That
8's weird.
makeup.
Is that actually a skirt, or are they sort of massive
That
trousers?
looks like maxi trousers to
It's
me.
like huge berry kind of
With yes,
Kasimoto.
yes, and it's got a sort of a Japanese-looking print. It's
Yeah.
very odd.
It's very Kansai Yamamoto.
I can't see anyone. I can't see.
Yeah, that feels
thing.
like an anomaly to me. It does feel more opulent though than we're used to. You know, you're talking about that delicate beading. I know a lot of that's there, but it feels like this is a little bit more kind of. I do think the silhouette is more grown up as well. You know, we've seen a lot of short on the Dior runway, whereas this we've got.
Are they boiler suits, 9 and 10?
Those are jackets.
Tops and trousers.
10 looks like a boiler suit.
Yeah, it does
Yeah.
actually. It looks like it's a boiler suit.
Not sure about that.
Yeah, I don't know if you want luxury.
I was really
that's
enjoying
definitely,
those.
She looks like she's off to do some
I'm quite into a luxury
domestic
boiler suit.
work because she's got her marigolds on as well.
Yeah, number 12. It does look like marigolds.
It
like
really,
that.
really does.
It's kind of interesting because I saw him do this, I think in pre-fall. He's rifting off the Claire McCardle popover dress and this idea of sort of the domestic. She's got a glove. It's almost like she is about to do the washing up.
Yeah.
And that's what the popover dress was about. He's really, really engaging with old American, which you know he's showing in Brooklyn. You know, Christian Dior. And they're really engaging with those sort of wearable, sporty shapes and. Like that, I love that look. With
Like
the
those
love.
parachute trousers in 14,
So
they've got
cool.
the zips
Yeah,
on.
but you know, at the beginning we were looking at the dresses with the very large hips, which I said they're reminiscent of 18th century open robes. Number 14 is a pair of stays with a tabbed waist detail. I mean, that's not come from anything at Dior. That's come from the sort of early to mid 18th century. So that seems to be the big reference here.
Yeah.
So it's not 1950, it's 1750 in fact.
Sure, no, because he was a big, I mean, I can see the influence coming through from, he was a very big fan of the Renaissance artist, Antonio Pisarano, who did the, and all these sorts of Renaissance shapes, and he loved the fabrication that he kind of portrayed in his drawings and the attention to detail. So that Renaissance shape,
And then it's contrasted with, you know, as you say, the American girl next door with shirt-waisted dress. I think that they look really wearable, these shirt-waisted dresses.
Yeah, 16. That colour's amazing.
That colour is really beautiful, actually. That kind of army green. You know,
It's so not a couture colour.
No, it's not a couture colour at all.
but it's that military kind of, you know,
Very
he's
him,
got,
isn't
Yeah,
it?
well,
Very
he's so
him
into
with
the military
uniforms.
armour,
Yeah.
badges. Which is, I think that's what's interesting about that look we were talking about, Kerry, as well, is even that has a slightly armour-like feel to it. You know, there is this kind of sense of doing battle with what.
But number 18 looks as though she's one of Charlie's angels or something,
Yeah,
doesn't she? She's about to go and do some...
She's about to go. But I think
Karate
that's
chop.
very Raf. You know, it's interesting that we're saying how deferential he's being to the codes of the house. Whereas, you know, 18, that feels very him.
Yeah.
Which is, I think it is nice to see, you know.
Yeah, it's important to see that.
Yeah.
And the 19's got the lovely sort of lower bell shape of the sleeves, which again, the middle looks like a sort of 50s inspiration, but the sleeves are very 30s, very fluid, and it's got this beautiful long
It's nice to mix that
hemline.
though, isn't it? To have
Very
the 50s
nice.
and, you know, to pair those things together is quite
Very,
interesting, because I feel like
yeah.
we've seen that shaped jacket in every collection
Yeah.
Very
since he
elegant.
started.
One thing that I find very interesting is that a lot of other journalists picked up on this is the interplay we're starting to see between Dior and his own work, rather than him bringing his aesthetic to Dior. You know, a lot was made at the menswear collection that he just showed, that, you know, the 5 buttons that he's been doing on the bar jacket, he'd done that for men at his own collection. And I think that's interesting to see that kind of conversation.
Yeah.
It is obviously...
well, it's nice because it means that there's something, you know, new injecting
both
in,
ways.
that it's genuine, because it's
proper
obviously
conversation.
coming from the heart in
Yeah.
some way, and he wants to embed it in both
He's not just doing it for
houses.
respect of the house, he's doing it for himself as well, because
Sure.
he likes it.
He's creating his own codes. I
Yeah.
mean, I was on that panel, and you know, that's the he's got to start coming up with, because you know, you've got this huge sort of, I guess, bedrock at Dior when it comes to the DNA. Everyone's talking about old Raf, and we got caught up on that on the panel. But what's new Raf? I
Yeah,
guess he's got to
exactly.
come up with some new.
Is that real chinchilla?
I presume
They
so.
will be, won't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, again, so I can just see a lot of Russian buyers wanting this collection.
Yeah.
It's just very luxury. I mean, very practical actually too.
It's interesting, a lot of We saw that at Schiaparelli as well. You know, we've been seeing it on the ready to wear, and it's interesting that you said, you know,
it is very
Russia and
Russian.
China aren't in recession. I think more than ever, I think we do get stuck in this European mentality, especially as journalists, where we'd always think that everything should be about, you know, the recession and what's going on here. And actually, I think it's one of the biggest examples that people are thinking about new.
But also, Europeans are well, and Americans are often very anti-fur, whereas there's not the same sensibility to that in Russia and China.
As well there, isn't
Don't
it?
care.
Yeah.
It's cold.
Yeah, you need it.
It's luxurious, and I look great in it. That's the
yeah, exactly.
I'm going to buy it, sort of thing.
Yeah. I find it constantly very interesting though to see designers having to respond to so many different tastes and cultures in one collection. I think that's really interesting. You know, Raf played with that when he did that collection. It was kind of split into different territories.
Because it's got to sell at all age groups too.
Yeah,
a lot of rich women are quite mature.
Yeah.
It's incredible. I mean, these collections, I mean, you look at the ones that Carl creates for Chanel, like 80 looks, and like there's a collection there for every single age, every single kind of attitude. They're appealing to all buyers and all territories and editors.
This is quite useful, isn't it?
Yeah, very useful, this bit.
Sections, yeah.
But it's interesting, again, that you were talking about those very early references and it just how he's brought that kind of slightly into the hem of the skirt.
Yes, the tab line.
I love these, they're beautiful, I think.
I do think he has a real way with colour, which I think is interesting. I think that's something that he's really owning at Dior, these really interesting kind of neons and jewel tones that have become very him.
It wasn't until I went to an Erwin Blumenfeld photography exhibition that I was like, oh yeah, this is Raf Simons. Go and look at the photographer's work, and it's literally all those jewel tones. You know, the repeats and everything. But combined with the looks.
Wouldn't you think somebody like number 32 or 33, if somebody walked in, wouldn't you think they'd put the wrong shoes on with that outfit? I mean, I really like the shoes.
I guess that's the idea, isn't
but
it?
I mean, the sort of neon orange with that very pale pastel pink, I suppose it's making a point, but I think it's really, I don't think it's particularly stylish.
But I think it's a nod to
I
how
think it's saying, look at me, but I don't think it's particularly stylish. No.
But he does that with those kind of the oddness of the colour clashes. You know, I think there's something.
It's almost like when he looks at it and he feels it's too safe, then he just throws on a shoe.
Yes, it's done.
There's something obviously about. I mean, I'm not. I think it's still considered. I think it's definitely considered. But I think a lot of. I don't know. Maybe that's the stylist thing as well. You look at something, you have to use something to throw it off.
Yeah. Well, we were talking about this obviously on Project Ugly Lou. That's what it's about. Sort of throwing in a bit of a curveball that looks like it's kind of been sort of eclectically styled in a way.
Considered, but not.
Well, I feel like as much as we all said minimalism feels very modern. I feel like as much as minimalism feels modern, like awkward ugliness feels modern as well.
Because is it possible to see the embroidery on number 36?
We can go to close-ups afterwards, can't we? Yeah.
Because again, that looks like a late 18th or early 19th century man's frock coat design that's been.
And that's very Galliano, though.
Mirage or something.
It's
quite nice, isn't it?
I find it interesting to see him. I don't know if it is deliberate or if it's just something I'm picking up on.
And 38 again. His man's court coat.
Yeah, exactly.
With matching waistcoat.
But I feel like we're starting to see him nod a bit more at the whole history of Dior, not just those 10 years now.
Yeah, that's true.
I know it's very easy to always see what you want to see in a designer's work, but...
I don't think he's referencing Dior here. He's referencing antique dress, much more, and men's antique dress, as well as women's.
Christian Dior did the sari dress, but apart from that, there aren't any Indian references. But
it's interesting, though, to see
that looks quite Indian to me.
Yes, exactly, it could be just
he's taken that one dress and gone to town with the whole thing.
But do we not think that's another practical consumer sort of focus? You know, that a lot of the women who will buy this live in cultures where it's not appropriate to be wearing something that is particularly revealing.
Maybe, yeah.
He's a real,
they're lovely, these. But again, this is, I mean, it's so nice to see something that's not just I'm sorry, some of it's been quite boring for me. It's just, here's another really wearable, boring coat, and we're going to sell loads of them.
Yeah, exactly.
But actually, here's something that's a bit more, that's got some, great embroidery. You know, this is what couture's about. It's luxury.
And that thought process as well, I find it interesting. He's a menswear designer, and a lot was made of the fact that you've got a menswear designer in one of the perhaps the top job in women's fashion that everyone's excited about and looks to, and then that he's riffing on menswear but in such an intelligent engaging way that cites so much history.
42's got a huge cuff, which you find in the 50s, 60s. And red is the hunting colour, so this woman, she's out to catch someone that looks amazing.
Do you like to see really historical references?
Pardon?
Do you like to see really historical references in clothes? Because it must be amazing when you work with clothes from those kind of periods, and then...
I do. I love to see reinterpretations, because nothing in fashion is new. They've always pinched things from the past, be it ancient Rome or whatever. But to see new interpretations, new colours, and the same skills, all those little embroiderers' hands working away still, that fills me with hope.
Yeah, that's nice. And do you find that houses, we've talked about them buying back their own pieces or buying contemporary design, but are you seeing houses invest in really, really historic dress, or not so much?
They tend to just buy back their own labels, the main houses. Designers, young designers, are more open to looking at everything across, from the 17th century onwards, not just their own houses, which is good.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I mean, Japanese even. I mean, quite amazing current fashion houses now looking at Japanese pieces.
For the structures and things like that, just to see something different.
Yes, right. To make them think again and look at beauty in a different way.
Yeah,
that's so much of fashion, Western fashion
comes from Japan. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, right now we keep talking about this here actually, how much is inspired by... This feels more Raf to me,
See, I love these. I much prefer this sort of thing to the frock coats and that sort of thing.
Oh no, I love the frock coats. I think
I love the frock coats. These are more wearable.
I just find them too vintage. I just find them very, very
too antique.
Retrospective, too antique.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it goes back to what we were saying.
It's just aesthetic, isn't it? It's just what you like to see.
I think there's something nice about couture that feels antique, because there is this kind of... It almost is quite outdated. It is quite historical. This idea of everything being made by hand and...
But he had it teamed with all black Helmut Lang type sort of get up. So he's trying to sort of bring that again, wearable, minimal kind of, just comboing up new kind of things and trying to.
It's nice to pair it that way though, isn't it? So it doesn't feel too literal.
Sure, you need that to cut it.
I think so.
Yeah.
I find it interesting in the palette. I know we've seen some jewel tones, but it's black and white, and a lot of it's what you said with the shoes are serving as a colourful distraction.
But also, I think when you see them, I mean, it's impossible to tell from here, but those fabrics, so there's going to be something amazing. There's going to be something in those fabrications that's going to be killer. That doesn't just mean it's a black sort of simple cap sleeve dress.
It doesn't take my heart away. It's just it's nice.
I think this is what we were talking about when it goes too much the other extreme, where you think to yourself, you just spent 15 looks on something that could be in a showroom somewhere, but should it really... It's interesting that it makes it to the runway. There obviously is a viable need for it to be on the runway because we're not running the business. They obviously feel the need to have it there.
And 65 looks, you were saying, is a lot. That they clearly couldn't edit it. They felt they couldn't edit it down anymore.
But it's interesting, I don't think he's a kind of... It goes back to what we were saying about collections not really being about storytelling. I don't think he's one of those designers that tries to kind of build his collections to a climax or have them sort of have a peak. It's very
not
much
like
kind of
the wonderful McQueen.
No, exactly.
It's completely
It's
different
very much in sections and it's offering a wardrobe to a woman, which is quite couture and quite traditional in some ways, but it's not trying to sort of take
though, don't you think?
Yeah, I really agree.
I think it's a waste of so many exciting spots, just have all these black things one after the other.
I feel like this collection's lost its rhythm. Because I know there's sections, but like Kerry said, all this black, it's kind of almost interrupted it because it's such a long collection. And you need to keep a thread of a story somehow.
I agree.
It's almost like
it's just too much of it. I think interspersed in between is nice, isn't it? Sort of a palette refresher, sort of in between a nice sort of beautiful black cashmere coat or a black fur or something.
But I totally agree with Kerry that you don't want to be reminded of the realities of selling and what will be in a Dior Couture collection. You want to see, great if those coats are going to sell really, really well.
Can't you keep that for ready to wear?
Yeah, that's what you would think, isn't it? These closing looks, I like them.
They're beautiful.
They're beautiful.
But they're like a softer toile version of the stuff that we saw at the beginning. Actually, more like
It's almost like the finale started it, wasn't it? You know, those huge sort of dresses, because in the past collections, these, you know, the finale's always been the huge hoop stuff.
Yeah, that's funny actually. It's like a reverse.
Very nice.
It's done on Marc Jacobs.
Yeah. The shoe, I like that though. Yeah. I like that he's playing with half-finished stuff. And you said the dresses were like twirls, but then that's almost like it's been half dyed.
But again, it's a Margiela code. This idea of, you know, clothes being made in, you know, it's this idea of in process and feeling like it's only been half done. Unfinished. And that creative provenance that comes from feeling like this was kind of handcrafted, but it's almost more prestigious to have a half-finished piece because there's been a process to it.
I mean, you say the black is boring, but that coat, number 8, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
I mean, I think of things like that, I just adore things like that. I just think that's like,
you know, you've got the outsized lapels and you've got the very 50s almost integral capelet on the
Well, yeah, and Dior was very famous for actually doing that capelet, so it's another shape. So.
Yeah, and it's interesting too much of it though.
It is interesting on the runway that how many models are coming out at once. I wonder if it would have felt less repetitive if you were seeing these kind of, I don't know if this is captured from the finale walkthrough, but it feels very much like.
It does look like.
But it's interesting how we've responded, because I feel like in a way this is what Raf is about. He's not really about, or how he's operated at Dior. I don't think he's going for that kind of gasp effect, you know, you used to get with Galliano. I think he is going for a kind of, you know, someone before said how repetitive it's been and people have kind of, but I think he's quite happy with that. You know, he's not looking to shock with each collection. Yeah.
I'm sure it's very commercial. It's just not terribly thrilling.
With all these concepts of like Renaissance references and the big coats and the dance, it felt kind of like, and the pops of like postmodern colour, it felt kind of quite 80s throughout, sort of in a way, sort of in terms of.
There's always something, Raf, that to me that always feels a bit 80s.
Yeah, sure, that's Heartland.
Yeah, and like, you know, narrow, bright orange satin trouser and something. You know, it's always something that feels a bit like that, isn't it?
Yeah,
50s,
the music referencing.
Yeah.
Lovely.
No, I agree. I think that's the most beautiful section for sure.
Yeah.
But that would have been a Chanel finale.
100%. Yeah. Well, that was his finale, sort of last season in a way. I remember there was all the bigger things that ended.
Do you think couture, it's interesting that we're talking about feeling slightly sort of underwhelmed by the black, or do you think couture should be about sort of that gasp effect? Because it's kind of, it is the last place of fashion where we haven't got that crazy pace.
It's the only place you can do it.
But it almost feels like he's trying to say you can gasp away at this incredible number 6, you know, that beautiful sort of embroidered 1 in a million dress, or you can look at a black peacoat and think that is the most extraordinary black peacoat I've ever seen, so why is that any less couture than that?
Because in terms of what we were saying, in terms of the house codes of Dior earlier on, we were talking a lot about construction and shape, and to show that in black, you know, like Cristobal used to you know, start all of his collections in black, just to talk about the line and only the line. And with him being a bit of a Belgian minimalist, it kind of makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense, I suppose. And he's not playing to that opulence game. You know, it is. There's a lot of collections that we see at Couture that are ornate, and I think he needs to have his point of difference. I think
it's just like you can do both. You know, equally, you know, something embroidered and beautiful, something that's beautifully cut in the most finest cashmere, that's double ply and, you know, triple ply and, you know, hemmed and tinned and piped.
Dior did that within his own collections. It's just there seems to be an awful lot of it. And I think, you know, just a few of those fabulous silhouettes, wow, we'd have all got the point.
Yeah, it's just too many.
Yeah.
It goes on and on and on and
too
on
much.
And on.
But I think he's in a way damned if he does, damned if he doesn't, because he's stuck with that tag now of being the man that's modernising couture, and I think with that must come a bit of a weight to put in these pieces that feel very contemporary and almost quite ready to wear, because that's a thing that people have commented before about his collection, though. It just felt a bit ready to wear.
Yes. I agree. I think
what do we think response will be to this collection? We've all said it'll be very commercial. Do we think that that's the biggest takeaway from what we're seeing here, that he's aiming to please buyers and perhaps not thinking too much about courting?
I think there's a section for everybody.
Yeah.
I feel like we could almost just do an analysis of each section on its own and just that be a show.
Yeah.
So I feel for every different, you know, magazine editor or buyer, there will be a section for them, which is maybe the art. There's an awful lot to digest.
But it is nice to see we talked about different sections, and I'm a sort of a bit of an obsessive about this, but I like to see couture collections that cater to all aspects of a woman's day, because I do think that a couture woman, there are women that buy it and they want something to wear. It doesn't all have to be evening in the morning, in the evening, you know. And I think
I just think in terms of fashion history, this is your one chance to shine and to show something extraordinary and beautiful and keep on doing it again and again. I mean, Dior had like 200 or 300 pieces in each. Okay, you didn't have as many collections, but yeah, that took your breath away.
But it's a different.
These days,
it's a different world now. There's less of these couture clients, and I'm sure that if they could push it to that extreme, the ego in any designer would want to push it to that massage, fairy tale, extravaganza. But I do think there's a commercial bend running through this as well, which is that they're trying to maybe attract younger clients, and I don't think younger clients that are these multi-millionaire Russian little princesses or whatever they are going to want necessarily the thing that we want, or people wanted within fashion history.
They did for McQueen though.
Yeah, that's what's interesting.
They did.
Sure.
It's just,
and we miss him greatly for that.
And in a way, you don't, you know, Lacroix used to call couture like the laboratory of fashion, and I think that's the thing, is it almost scares me that we're seeing a trickle up effect where ready to wear is influencing couture, you know,
because you can't do it anywhere else.
That's exactly, and there needs to be a flip back to the point where couture is mainly to preserve those techniques, is filtering down into the ready to wear, rather than we're trying to replicate the minimalism and the ease and the androgyny that we've seen in ready to wear.
Because this could be his ready to wear collection.
Oh, it could.
You know, it really could be. So if you think of last season, the big skirts that he ended his ready to wear with their, I mean, different fabrications, different colours, but the same sort of idea.
The thing is with Raf though, where it's almost square pegs, round holes, Dior knew what they were getting when they signed him up. He's very much about wearability. And I think maybe that's what they wanted. And, you know...
Well, you look at Alexander Wang Balenciaga, it's the same thing, you know, it's about wearability, isn't it? That's the sort of buzzword that seems to be behind any appointment.
Sure, and I don't think it's necessarily... It's heartbreaking if you're working within the industry and you want some... you know, something original and creative, and you can see all this stuff. And unfortunately, I think that we're working within an industry that's an industry. It isn't just...
It does just make you feel for those ateliers, though, and you think, how are they going to continue? Or just for, you know, I have a complete obsession with Mr. Pearl and people like that, and you think, you know, you need those people, and it's scary to think that...
And I think that... I don't know, I think that he still will be working with these people, but do these people need to, you know, sort of absolutely go hell for leather to show their relevance still there? Maybe remarketing their relevance, which is that they can do it in a new sort of 21st century way.
Well, it was interesting to Lesage do all the work with Mary Transi for the ready to wear, you know. I suppose there are other outlets, aren't there?
Yeah, that's a good example though, of going back to sort of something that's more opulent in your ready to wear.
Yeah, which is interesting. But then there's also that counter argument of how, you know, will demi couture on ready to wear runways, like we see at McQueen, will that be the death of couture week? And
like Dolce & Gabbana do their demi couture.
Exactly,
But I remember like Christian Lacroix's last ever collection, and people were crying anyway because it was his last ever collection. But he couldn't afford a lot of the fabrics. He couldn't, everybody walked for free, Cafe de Flore put on the food for free. I mean, I'll start crying thinking about it. I mean, it was so heartbreaking that he no longer has a house. But because he couldn't afford the kind of beading of fabrics that he usually could, it was very toned down, and people were saying, why didn't you do this sooner? Because actually, his work was almost better for it. So I think that we reached those levels with the likes of Lacroix that, yes, we loved looking at Vlada in some, you know, she looked like she belonged on a cathedral wall somewhere, and some, but it obviously wasn't selling, and it wasn't something that people felt they could walk into a room and wear. We want the fairy tale, we want the fantasy,
but it's almost like a house like Dior, because they have all these other collections throughout the year, they really could afford to go crazy with the couture and not sell it, because actually they can sell X many perfumes, they can sell their pre-fall, they can sell their cruise, they can sell every, you know, 4 other collections a year. So actually this could be the epitome of them being a house of couture and not selling a thing.
It's nice. isn't it?
You're right, because couture is the petrol in the engine that then is the vision that then goes on to sort of propel on the perfumes.
But I guess
and
the
sunglasses
but
and
now it
everything
seems to have some other sort of objective, which is we've got to
also
almost
to sell.
flog it.
But maybe this is the vision. It's pared back. It's commercial. It's focused. It's
underwhelming.
Yeah,
it's funny because they're not bad things. When you're talking about couture, it does seem underwhelming.
Yeah, but maybe that's about, you know, I'm interested in.
It makes me sad, actually. It just makes me sad when I think of all the beautiful, you know, creations by Bohan, by Saint Laurent, you know, by lots of talented people. It's kind of dull.
But, you know,
I don't see the romance. I don't see the cocktail hour. I don't see, you know.
But look at what Gucci Group did when Lee McQueen went, got Sarah Burton to soften the hell out of it, and all of his apparently misogynistic sort of, you know, narratives were kind of watered down, and they finally thought, well, you know, with due respect obviously to Lee, you know, he wasn't there anymore to defend that, and say, oh no, it's way too girly, it's way too pared down. But sadly, maybe this is kind of emblematic of this idea of that we're in an industry and we have these incredible visionaries that are capable of giving us the fairy tale, but it's about.
But do we want everyone to be reined in?
Well.
I think that's the problem. Is you think couture is the last place where you can
really go mad.
Yeah, and let designers be designers.
And thank God for Daphne Guinness.
Yeah,
you know,
that's just a good sentiment.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I imagine, like, say, for example, if Victor and Rolf, if they had a couture line, they would
do
go,
couture though.
Yeah, they do go hell for leather.
Yeah.
But is Raf going to ever be that person
No,
that's
he
going to
never
be the
was, he
jump
never
out
will.
of a cake type sort of
No.
thing?
Yeah.
But then you need that couture. I think you do need Raf. I love what he's doing for Dior. I really actually do. I think it's incredible. But then you need that couture, and maybe we need Lacroix or Galliano back.
we do.
Yeah, you're like, we do.
We'll start off with another young designer that just does couture. You know, there is
Well,
a
it's
few
interesting
coming
with Iris
through.
Van Herpen,
Exactly, there are a few
Boucheron.
coming through that start with that, and they just sort of, you know, they've been at maybe one of those houses and train, and they do, you know, the embroidery and sort of they're really retrospective, but bring it, you know, the modernity. It's quite an interesting concept to start afresh as just as a couture designer.
So we like it, but we're not wowed. Is that? We expect more from couture.
Yeah.
I like it in full, but it's not. To me, it's not couture.
Yeah.
I like the beginning and the end.
Yeah, me too. Actually.
The pretty ones.
Yeah,
let
the
the
pretty
I love the black coats. That's my favourite thing.
Yes.
It's a good black coat,
Oh
but
no,
not
I mean,
here.
and they are DNA.
Yeah.
Dior, he's given us the capelet there, and like you said, in terms of the, I mean, there's lots of fun stuff in between, and I'm thinking he's thinking about the red carpet, he's thinking about girls in LA, he's thinking about getting on the cover of this, you know.
Or even if he's not, somebody else is for him, aren't they?
Sure,
Yeah.
but he's not. No,
Yeah.
he's not.
Yeah.
Sorry,
No, but it's true. Somebody's sort of saying, "Go on,
team.
think about those girls. Think about that."
Absolutely, loads of business.
It's interesting. It's very similar to what we said on the Schiaparelli discussion. Is a lot of the collections, you get this sense of a designer having a vision, which is then being pushed and pulled by various different voices within the sort of the machine that they're working for, saying, but you need to pull out more of this, and you need to put in more of that.
Think about your American Vogue cover.
Yeah, and it takes away that narrative and that story, because you can't have a narrative if you're having to twist and turn in all these different ways.
Well, it just becomes diluted, like you said.
Yeah.
Such a challenging job, and that's why I'm so pleased he has his own line.
Yeah.
Because you can keep that sort of foot out of the game.
Yeah.
Be
Live
yourself.
your own vision.
That floor-length chinchilla is kind of vile.
I know. It's about selling, isn't it?
It looks like each one's a proper pellet, though, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, pelt.
Pellet, sorry, yes, pellet. Freudian.
They're super soft.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So our breath's not been taken away then, but I think that's what you want from couture, isn't it? Though you want.
It's all so wearable, but no.
There's lots of wearable clothes in the world, aren't there?
Yeah, that's the point.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. Muted response to Dior. But at least we like the beginning and the end, so some positivity. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.